Welcome back to the Buce Plant channel, where we cover everything aquascaping and we try and entertain and inspire you along the way. My name is Logan with Team Buce Plant, and today we are talking all about aquarium lighting and why it's so important to pick the right aquarium light for your specific build. All of the lighting and accessories that we showcase and recommend for today's video are going to be linked down below in the description, but feel free to head to buceplant.com and check them out for yourself. Before we get started, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for lots more content like this. Now let's dive in. So why is choosing the right light so important in the first place? I mean, why can't you just slap on any old light that you find at the hardware store? Well, in the aquascaping hobby, we strive really hard to find the perfect balance between the lighting, the CO2, and the nutrient levels. And the lighting sort of serves as the gas pedal of your entire system. So if you have very highly powerful lighting, things are gonna move really fast and your plants are gonna grow really well and you're gonna have vibrant coloration. However, you're at increased chance of getting some algae. And if you run a weaker, less powerful light, you'll be able to grow shade plants really well and low demanding plants, but you might not be able to keep those really highly demanding red stems that maybe you see online. However, your chance of getting algae with that less powerful light will be quite a bit lower than with the high power light. So it's really up to you to determine what your goals are for your specific aquascape and decide whether you want to run low lighting, medium lighting, or very powerful lighting. Additionally, it's also really important that you determine whether or not you're going to be running CO2 in your tank before you go light shopping. Because with high lighting comes high responsibility, and if you decide to run a really powerful, vibrant light without CO2, your chances of getting algae goes up significantly, and while your plants may thrive under all that light, so will the algae. If you decide you want to bypass CO2 completely, we recommend that you stick to low demanding, low light plants and consequently purchase a light that isn't quite as powerful. And most importantly, determine what your maximum budget is before you go light shopping. Fortunately, these days, there's so many amazing brands and different types of lighting that fit pretty much any budget. And at all budget levels, you'll be able to find something that grows plants well. So have an idea of what you're prepared to spend and then find something that suits your tank within that budget range. For much of the history of the aquarium hobby, the prevailing lighting types were incandescent, fluorescent, and metal halide. But these days, it's overwhelmingly the light-emitting diode, also known as LED. So why LED? Why don't we use those other types as much? Well, in the past, those other types of lighting were much more available and significantly cheaper than LED lighting. But in recent years, LED lighting has become much smaller, easier to manufacture, and much more affordable. However, independent of price, you will always get the most lumens per watt with an LED light compared to the other types. But what exactly is a lumen and a watt, and why should you care? Well, we'll get into that later, but just know for now that LED lights are remarkably energy efficient. They produce much less heat output than metal halide, fluorescent, and incandescent, and they have a significantly longer lifespan. So even though LED lights have gotten significantly cheaper over the last few years, there's usually a bit of a higher upfront cost compared to something you'd pick up at, say, your hardware store. However, they last significantly longer and you'll have a much lower energy bill when running them. So over time, they're quite a bit more cost effective. Additionally, LED lights in this hobby have truly been optimized to grow aquarium plants. And most of the major brands that you'll see available on the marketplace today, you almost can't go wrong because these have been designed and engineered to output the wavelengths that plants love. And finally, LED lights are built to have a really amazing spread of light compared to incandescent, fluorescent, and metal halide. So typically with an LED light, you'll be able to put the fixture on your tank or hang it above, and you won't have to worry about that light getting to all the corners of the tank. Not all lighting is created equal. Plants take up light in the visible light spectrum, which exists in the 400 to 700 nanometer spectrum of visible light. But what does that actually mean? Well, the 400 to 700 nanometer range encompasses red, green, and blue wavelengths. aka RGB light. And most aquarium plants primarily favor red and blue wavelengths, and they primarily reflect green wavelengths, though they do use it, but they primarily reflect it back at your eye, which is why most of the plants you see appear green. Most experts today believe that red LEDs should take up about 50% of your light, and blue shouldn't really exceed 15%. And then you fill up the remainder of the LED light with green. So this is constantly changing, but that gives you a sort of good guideline. And just know that plants primarily want that red and blue light. However, it's important to have some green in there to balance it out. After all, if your tank was washed out in red or blue, it would just look unnatural. So now let's talk about lighting intensity. Earlier we learned that LED lights produce the most lumens per watt out of all the lighting types. But what does lumen and watt actually mean? So wattage is the amount of energy it takes to produce a given brightness or lumen of light. In essence, the higher the wattage, the brighter the light will be. And a lumen is the amount of brightness that the human eye perceives. So a light with high wattage and high lumens is gonna be really, really bright to your eye, but it's also gonna use a lot of energy. A light with very low wattage and low lumens won't use much energy, but it also won't produce very much visible light to you. So this is a good sort of basic guideline when you're comparing lights. If you're looking at the same type of brand for aquarium lighting and you're comparing the different lines of lighting and the different budgets of lighting, you can take a look at the watts and the lumens and get a rough idea of how they'll stack up next to each other. So as we mentioned earlier, not all lighting is created equal. So just because a light fixture produces a ton of lumens and uses a ton of watts doesn't mean it's gonna grow plants well. What we like to look at next is called PAR, which has a long, complicated name, but actually isn't as complicated as it sounds. So PAR stands for photosynthetically active radiation. And all you need to know is that it means how much of those lumens are the types of wavelengths that plants need to grow. In essence, the wavelengths we mentioned earlier, the light that exists in the 400 to 700 nanometer range of the visible light spectrum. So PAR tells you how much of that juicy RGB light a certain fixture contains and outputs. And one really technical thing you can look up for the light you're interested in is some PAR data. So PAR data basically tells you at a given depth and a given distance from a light fixture, how much of that usable spectrum of light is hitting a surface. And then you can use that data to compare one light to another. Now, when choosing a light based on intensity and power, make sure you're taking into account the depth of your aquarium. So the deeper the tank, the more PAR and wattage and lumens your light is gonna need to reach those plants way down low. And if you have a shallow tank, you can get away with a less intense light because that PAR is gonna hit the bottom of the tank, no problem. Color temperature, measured in Kelvin, is essentially the look, feel, and vibe of your light. So depending on the color temperature, which ranges from 1000 to 10,000 Kelvin, your light will either appear a bluish tint or more of a warm, orangey, candly tint. And then everything in between is possible as well. So somewhere in the middle of the Kelvin scale, you have what is considered the daylight range. And this is around 5500 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin. This color temperature of lighting is going to appear very close to the sun, so it's going to have a very nice mix of warm red colors with blue, red, and white light. A good benchmark for a planted aquarium, something that'll look very nice in your house, is around the 6500 Kelvin mark. A lot of aquarium lights you find will exist around this range. This is great for freshwater. Now in the marine world, it's completely different. Those lights have more of a blue tint, but around 6500 Kelvin for a freshwater planted aquascape is gonna get you something that looks and feels really nice in your home. So one thing to highly consider is where your aquarium will sit in your apartment or house. If you have a really bright LED light right next to your television, or if it's by your couch and it's sort of getting in your line of sight, it's gonna be really bothersome. So you wanna make sure your light in your aquarium are set up somewhere that isn't gonna interfere with your daily activities and will be in a place that will still allow you to enjoy it. So once you determine where you're going to be placing your aquarium and consequently the light, you have a few options for mounting the light to your aquarium. There are three major styles of lighting. First, we have the most common, the sit on the side type. Next, we have the clip-on variety. And finally, we have the pendant style. So the type of lighting that sits on the side of the tank is super easy to set up. It usually comes out of the box with different varieties of legs. Some come in an acrylic, see-through type, other types are super slick metal, and you simply mount it to the side of the tank. And sometimes those sides are even adjustable, so you can extend them to a wider tank or make it more narrow. Other times the width of the legs are fixed, so it's really important to do your research and make sure you buy something that works for the width of your tank. But if you want a little bit more flexibility, you have clip-on lights. And common examples of this are the Aquaworks Orion and the ONF Flat Nano. These are really convenient because you can clip them to any part of the glass, they won't damage the glass, and then you'll be able to adjust the light, change the angle from there. So you get a lot of flexibility. And if you want the most flexibility, you have the pendant type lights. And with these lights, they're suspended from the ceiling or from some sort of a fixture. And they're super cool because they make maintenance really easy because the light won't get in your way. And additionally, if you find that your light is too intense or too weak, you can adjust the distance of the light from the tank itself and make really fine tuning. So find something that works for your budget, your tank, your home, your lifestyle. And while it can seem overwhelming, as long as you pick a light that is trusted and outputs the right type of wavelengths for your plants, the style is just going to come down to preference. So in your quest to find the perfect light for your aquarium, it's really important to remember that the light is the gas pedal. So if your intensity is too high, you are at significant risk for getting algae if things aren't balanced. Conversely, if the intensity is way too low, your plants are really going to struggle, and algae can also take over in a situation where the plants aren't doing too well. So it's important to find an intensity that works for your tank, and when in doubt, start with a good quality light and lower the intensity with the dimmer. If the light you purchase does not have a built-in dimmer, it is absolutely paramount that you have access to a dimmer, because the last thing you want is to be stuck at 100% intensity when you're getting a ton of algae. At buceplant.com, we carry a variety of lights that already have built-in dimmers, and a few examples are the ONF Flat Nano, the Aquaworks Orion, and the all-new Twin Star C line. So go ahead and check out those lights. They're great lights to get you started in the hobby, and they have that built-in dimmer. Outside of the dimmer, you're just going to want to make sure to pick up a timer, because it's highly important that you're consistent with the amount of light you have each day, as well as the time of day that it comes on and turns off. If your light doesn't have a dimmer, you can also check out buceplant.com for an external inline dimmer. So how long should you have your aquarium light on every day? Well, this isn't really easy to answer because every single aquascape and aquarium is completely unique. Some folks get away with having it on 10 hours a day with high intensity. Other folks keep it on as low as 6 hours a day. So it's really gonna vary, but a good benchmark to start with is anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. If you're running a low-tech, low-light tank, you can get away with around 6 hours a day with lower intensity. But if you're growing really intense coloration with high demanding stems, you're probably going to want to lean closer to that 8 hours a day at a higher intensity. But as we mentioned earlier, achieving that balance between the lighting, the nutrients, and the CO2 in your tank is a bit of an experimentation process. So start off on the lower end, and then if things stabilize, Give it a couple weeks, observe, make sure you're not getting any algae, and then ramp it up perhaps an extra half hour at a time until you reach a duration that works really well for you. And once again, we can't say this enough, consistency is everything. Don't have your light come on at a different time every day of the week. Set something up, have it consistent 7 days a week, observe for 2 to 4 weeks, and then make changes if necessary. So you can find timers in the most traditional old school form, which is the mechanical timer. Sometimes folks use this for Christmas tree lights, so those are available to pick up at pretty much any hardware store and are super inexpensive. And then you have more high-tech versions like smart plugs or smart power strips. So it's gonna depend on your budget, your lifestyle, and really what you want to achieve, but any sort of timer will do. Just make sure that you're consistent with the duration and the time. So that'll do it for everything you need to know about purchasing an LED light. And while a lot of this can seem overwhelming, if you stick to any of the brands that we carry on buceplant.com, you can be assured you're gonna find a light that grows aquarium plants well, and all of these lights are gonna look great in your home. So have a browse, determine your budget, and find a light that is congruent with the goals you have for your aquarium. So let us know down below in the comments what your absolute favorite light in the aquascaping hobby is, because we'd love to hear from you. As always, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time. This has been Logan with Team Buce Plant. Bye-bye.